Okay, Brian Folks, can you hear us? Brian? Brian, you'll need to unmute.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So we're here as a board of county canvassers for Utah County, Utah. And we have two regular agenda items. The first, we'll go ahead and approve the minutes from the November 17, 2020 Board of Canvassers of Utah County, Utah meeting. I think each of us have a copy of those, reviewed it. And I see the comments that were reported at the time. Commissioner Lee, you have any comments on that?
Nope. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes stated in regular agenda item number 1.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 That passes 3-0. Okay. We're here to also sign the June 28, 2022 election certified report. And that indicates the date of the election day itself, not today's date. And before we go there, I'd like to welcome public comment. And we'll keep it to 2 minutes for those that would like to speak to it. We'll have a little clock off here to the right. But we would welcome any insights from the public if they would like to do that at this time. And please state your name when you come up.
Wendy Hart, Highland. Thank you all. I just want to make the point, I really appreciate your allowing public comment on this issue. One of the issues that we have as members of the public is the ability to verify the results of the election. I want to be very clear. It's not that we have concerns that anything's going wrong in the clerk's office. It's just that the machines are certified by the feds. Nobody gets to, we don't know what software is actually running on it. And so it's very, very difficult for us to have, to be able to verify as a member of the public. And when we bring up these concerns, we're told, well, we need to prove to the government that there are problems. And having looked at the audit, I attended on, was it last Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it was, and we're reviewing about 1% of the election returns. And this year it was different because it was just the digital images compared to the cast vote records. It didn't have anything to do with the paper ballot, so there wasn't that clear chain of custody to verify that the scanned image matched the paper ballot and so on and so forth. And that, I understand, is nothing that you guys can do anything about. That came down from the lieutenant governor. But that, just so you're aware, that doesn't engender transparency and, it doesn't make us feel good. No warm fuzzies on that. So I realize you're between a rock and a hard place. I am sensitive to that. But I just want to state for the record that the public is concerned because we don't have the access to be able to verify. We don't have a problem with our people losing as long as it's done fairly. And again, don't want to cast any aspersions on the clerk's office because there aren't any there. Okay, it's just that the entire system, we need to go back to where people, average citizens, have the capability of verifying what's going on. And if you need a cybersecurity certification to do that, it's a problem. So thank you and appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, wait a minute. This is Utah County. There's nobody else?
Yeah.
One on Zoom? You have to patch him in vocally, audio.
Helen Robson, if you want to go ahead and unmute and proceed with your comment.
Can you hear me? Oh, great. A picture of my husband with my name. Sorry. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I was involved in the delegate process this year, and I know there's a lot of people that were, I remember we did, so many times we did like a raise of hands of how many people were brand new delegates for the first time, and it was well over 60% of the room. I was involved in a lot of different delegate groups where we were talking, we were vetting candidates, we were just doing a lot of things, and my main concern is the end result of a lot of the, well, quite a few of the elections do not match like what I was seeing the last couple of months and the delegates. And I know that I know that we have a lot of people that are voting that aren't delegates, and that's understandable. But there was a huge increase. I know, like, Amelia, you had shared with me about like voting the last couple of years and how it was very low numbers. And I was really happy to see at the primaries that we had gone up. Like, I think, what did we end? Around 75,000, just the primaries with Republican only. And in the past, it was like 55,000 with the whole county in past elections. I'm trying to remember what it was. But it was a great increase. And I really feel like that is the efforts of the delegates getting out there and really helping their neighbors to know what's going on. So when I see the results of the elections and I see, like, example, Kim Del Grosso, she's not even in my area. But I know at the county, at the state convention, she was like 80-something%. And then to have her completely wiped out by Cindy, who had way less support, that just blows my mind. There's just a lot of red flags. Another one, Bill Lee. I don't understand that one bit. That one, he should have definitely taken this election. I just would like to have some kind of audit or something. Like, I don't even care if it's an outside source. I would like it to be an outside source. Not that I don't trust the county. I just think that there needs to be other eyes on this because there's too many red flags that do not add up with all the work that we did. So that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
There's some.
You can start my slides. My name is Cindy Butler, and I actually brought some slides, probably 10 minutes worth, but I'll do my best. I'm a statistician, professional, master's degree, and I've come to talk about how the Board of Canvassers can use CVR data in decision-making on whether or not to certify the election. Next. Here's an example of the CVR data that was used in Otero County, New Mexico. And this is an example of no statistical evidence consistent with mail-in ballot stuffing or digital manipulation. You can see each one of those dots is a subgroup of ballots. And on the left there, it looks like the average is about 78%. What was this race? It was for judicial retention. Judge Bryant, how many voted yes? 80% voted yes. All the dots are within the control limits. The black ones are tabulators processed at the county level. The colored ones are ballots processed at local voting centers. Now let's look at what it looks like when there is statistical evidence of mail-in ballot stuffing or digital manipulation. This is the very same county, two different races. Top one is county commissioner. Bottom one is county treasurer. You can see evidence, statistical evidence of ballot stuffing. The portion on the left is early mail-in voting. In New Mexico, they have 3 periods of voting. Early mail-in is about a quarter of the vote. 50% of the vote is early in process. Those two happen about the same time. And then there's election day. You can see where the limits go from 0 to 100%. That's because there's so few ballots in that little subgroup, maybe a handful of 5 or 10, and that indicates that we don't know anything about that subgroup. It could go from 0 to 10. But the rest of them, the limits are a little bit wider because if you can see, the total votes in that race was only 9,358 because fewer could vote for County Commissioner District 3. In the race on the bottom, is County Treasurer, Democrat. He had 22,000 votes in his race, so the limits are narrower, reflecting how many more ballots are in each dot. Can I show you 2 more slides?
Ma'am, I wish, but no, I can't.
Let me just show you my ending slide then. Just pop to the end. So did this happen in Utah County? I respectfully submit that I don't know, you don't know, but we could know. Everybody in this room could reach the same conclusion based on those kinds of charts with statistical limits that show us the statistical evidence of ballot stuffing or digital manipulation. We could all know in 5 minutes. I've only had 2. Thank you.
No, we don't.
No, I'm
we
sorry.
don't.
No, I apologize. No, I thought you meant, did you want 2 minutes? Yes, you can have 2 minutes, but we don't transfer minutes.
You could use my 2 slides. The second from the ending slide. No. Just read it. Just read it.
Well, the idea was supposed to be unique perspectives from each
He'll love it.
individual.
He'll love it. Second to the last slide.
It's okay.
My name is Lou Moore. I live in Provo, Utah. And I do have a unique perspective. And my perspective is we have an election system right now that has flaws in it and cannot be verified as being accurate in terms of a tally. Can I have the next and last slide?
One more slide past that. There.
So mail-in ballot stuffing or digital manipulation, evidence is impossible to discover by sampling 1,000 ballots or spot checking at a public county audit. You must have context to discover evidence. All the ballot records or cast vote records in order to do that. Other variables also aid understanding and visualizations with appropriate statistical limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public comment? Is there any public comment?
Mike Carpenter, Orem, Utah. I wasn't going to speak, but I really want to reiterate what Cindy said. We can know. More importantly, we should know. Trust but verify. That's an old adage, and it should hold firm in the homeland as well as outside of the homeland. It's just ridiculous that we can't know the answers and the truths. All across this nation, we find proof after proof these machines are faulty and fraudulent, and yet the legislature keeps pushing them down. Why? There's an ulterior motive. I'm tired of no transparency and no answers. A number of these primaries don't make sense at all, and we need to see the truth. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are no other public comments, Alice, is there anyone online? Then I'd like to turn some time over to the clerk auditor to outline the process, the data that you have that we published. I think it was updated yesterday. Has there been any additional updates to that one?
Yeah.
If you go to Utah County Elections on Google or whatever search engine, it will bring up a website that you can find and look at the data there.
So Josh, am I assuming the email you sent us just before this meeting, that's the latest updates? Is that what you're going to speak to us from? Okay, I'll open that. I was reviewing that right as the meeting started, and it looked like there were a few updates, but not a lot.
Right, correct.
Okay.
So
I've got that open
the
now.
2 main types of results that you each have and that are also posted publicly is the summary election results, which is a race by race result of the total ballots cast and counted for each of the races, both in the Republican primary and also in the nonpartisan primary in a couple of local school board races. So that's the countywide summary is posted online at utahcounty.vote under the election results tab, and I've also shared it with each of you. That's for the June 28th primary, and it should be date stamped at the bottom for today's date, July 12th at 1:04 p.m. So that's the final report. There's a digital version of this data that's also sent to the state for those statewide results and for the way in which the state is also reflecting and showing and displaying election results for all the counties. That's also at elections.utah.gov, where you can see statewide election results. The other type of results and data that it's shared is what's called the Statement of Votes Cast, and that is a document that shows a precinct by precinct breakdown of the votes that were cast, how many ballots were counted, and for which candidates in each of the races that pertain to each of those precincts. In addition to that, I'd like to acknowledge really the wonderful effort on the part of our county support teams, like the IT department and the GIS team within the IT department, who has utilized our GIS tools, Esri, among one of the first counties in the nation really to do this, to show an interactive map where on our website you can go and look at the map results, where you can kind of drill down and look visually at each of the precincts and districts throughout the county, and you can see election results that way. That's really helpful for the public who is interested in election results. So those are the three types of results that we've got posted there: the summary results, that interactive map, and then the statement of votes cast, which is a more detailed report that's precinct by precinct.
And the statement of votes cast, those show total numbers by precincts, correct?
Exactly.
For each individual.
Yep, for each race and for each district and for each precinct. And precincts vary in size. There's some small precincts that may only have a dozen voters, all the way up to 1,500 to 2,000 voters or so in some of our largest precincts. A couple of things I'd like to point out. So first, let me just give you a quick overview on what you're doing. So as the Board of Canvassers, what you are doing is essentially declaring, as in most cases in this election, nominated those candidates that were running to obtain the Republican Party nomination in this primary. And so when you sign the certification document, you'll be declaring as nominated those candidates whose districts are wholly within Utah County. You're not actually certifying the election results for statewide or multi-county districts. That will be done by the State Board of Canvassers. But your canvasser's report that you're finalizing today basically includes these results that are attached. And in fact, let me hand you each kind of a paper copy as well, if you don't want to look at the digital.
That'd be
Oh,
great.
good.
I'm trying to zoom in on my.
That's what I was doing too. Thank you.
Let me have both.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh. There.
Okay, so the first page is an election statistic overview. So here we have shared some of the just high-level kinds of statistics about participation, how many eligible voters there were. This particular election is a little bit unique as a primary. It's a hybrid between a Republican primary for all Republican offices, as well as in cases where there were more than the amount of candidates for a local school board than you can have in the general election. There's a nonpartisan primary to narrow down the field of candidates for those local school board races. So that's nonpartisan. So when you combine the total number of registered voters that were eligible for the Republican primary in Utah County, and you add that to the nonpartisan, whether those be a different party or unaffiliated voters that are eligible to participate in that primary, the total amount of voters that could have participated was just over 240,000. We counted 90,851 ballots, so just under 91,000 ballots, which puts the total turnout at 37% when you factor in that nonpartisan amount. If you look at just the amount of registered Republicans and those that cast a Republican primary ballot, then the turnout is closer to 42%. If you look statewide, that was closer to 48%. So we're a little under the state average. That could just be because we have younger populations. We have a lot of students that may be, gone home for the summer that were at one point registered here, and they may or may not be here anymore. Also, the Republican Party registration is pretty high in our county, so there's just a larger denominator, which makes it, you know, that much more difficult to get a higher percentage of turnout. So there's some other statistics here about, you know, cure letters, for example, which I'll point out. Cure letters are when a voter has returned their ballot to us, but they have not signed the envelope or the signature didn't appear to match. And so we have to review those signatures or contact those voters to cure that deficiency of either having not signed it or maybe signed the wrong one. And so we sent out just over 1,900 of those letters, and of those that were returned that were actually accepted, you know, there was a few hundred that actually were cured. So those are the overview statistics there. Any questions on those particular statistics before I dive into the next piece?
Just the ballots counted after election days, there was 16,431, or 18% of the vote. Those had postmarked of what date on them? Was that the day before election day or day of?
Yeah, so under state law, you must postmark your ballot the day before election day for it to be counted. So in order for our office to be able to count a ballot, we have to either be in possession of that ballot on election day before the polls close. Like in the case of somebody who puts it in a drop box, you could put it in a drop box on election day because the drop box won't close until 8 p.m. But if you're going to send it through the mail, you have to have it postmarked the day before election day. So if we receive your ballot on or after the election day and it's postmarked on election day or later, we can't count it. And so there's a number of those that we didn't count that have an invalid postmark. Also, some of those that are counted after election day are the ballots we receive on election day. We just couldn't count them on election day because we received so many, and the counting process continues until we're complete. In fact, we had over 20,000 ballots dropped off in drop boxes on election day. One of the things that we noticed in this election is it seemed like voters kind of waited to the last minute to return their ballots, which isn't actually uncommon. That was common in the 2020 election. We even had some traffic jams at drop-off boxes on the election in 2020. This year, we didn't have any traffic jams. We had, a handful of cars that were waiting, but nothing, particularly significant. So those are the ballots that are counted after election day, or those that we either already had in our custody that had not yet been counted, or those that we received that were appropriately postmarked.
Sure.
Any other questions about these overview stats?
It looks like over 1,000 people cured their ballot. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's fantastic. That's great.
I do note that the postal system returned as undeliverable about 1,500 some. You know how that stood against last time in 2020's election? I didn't ask ahead of time, but do you happen to have an idea what it was like last time?
Yep. So this is an important point here, which is that we send ballots to every active registered voter to the address that we have on file for them, their mail address. When Utah County transitioned to vote by mail, it meant that we needed to make sure we had accurate registration records and accurate addresses to send those ballots out. One of the challenges we experienced in 2018 was over 10% of ballots that were sent out were returned by the post office as not being able to be delivered because the people had moved or something was wrong with the address. The post office does not forward ballots. So if the ballot can't be delivered to that house because that person has moved, it gets returned to our office. Unfortunately, if there's a lot of that gets returned, that's kind of a waste of postage. And it's unfortunate for the voter because if they've moved and we don't know it, then they're not going to get their ballot at their new address. They'll have to come in on election day or correct their address before election day, which, by that time the ballots have been sent out 3 weeks before election day. They don't have a lot of time. And so our office has worked very hard each election cycle to make sure we have accurate addresses by going through the national change of address records through the post office and also sending out various postcards and notices to voters to confirm their addresses. In the 2020 general election, we had about 2.5% of ballots that were returned undeliverable. So that was a huge improvement from that 2018 mark. And so to actually see this at under 0.5% is frankly incredible. And it's really a testament to the hard work of our team to keep addresses updated. It's probably also a function of the fact that this particular year there were some new lots of new things happening. Voters were assigned new precincts that have been reconfigured thanks to redistricting. There were new legal requirements related to partisan affiliation and registration. And because of that, that triggered our office sending out a lot of notices this year to all the voters saying that you've been assigned to a new precinct. You need to make sure that your party affiliation is what you want it to be by this particular deadline, and other kinds of reminders that then triggered voters to update information, whether that be their address, et cetera. It also allowed us to send mail to voters and see which ones got returned undeliverable. So all of that work culminated, I think, in this such a low number of ballots that were returned to our office as undeliverable.
So I know the national average is around 3%. So in 2018, we were over 3 times the national average. We were just under the national average in 2020, and this is a fraction of the national average.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
For public information, the total ballots received by the post office was 36,550. Total ballots received from drop boxes was 53,893. Ballots audited by the state was 898, so just a fraction under 1%. And signatures audit was just at 902, of which I and my senior policy advisor got to be part of. Okay.
so those are the overview stats. If you'd like, I can move on to some items on just the results themselves. Okay, so there were some questions about the idea of nonpartisan ballots. I kind of mentioned that about the school board races, but what I wanted to explain was that while the nonpartisan ballots that are cast is 4,800, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the number of votes cast for school board, because Republican voters received a ballot that included both the Republican races and the nonpartisan school board races when applicable. And so certainly there were Republican ballots that were received that included the nonpartisan school board race. So if there's any question about those two numbers, that kind of, I think, helps explain that. Just for purposes of the record, as you adopt the canvasser's report, which is declaring certain candidates as nominated, I was going to read through those candidates that actually applies to, that are based on the results report. So none of the statewide or federal races are being certified by the Utah County Board of Canvassers. Rather, it's only those candidates whose districts are wholly contained within Utah County. So in the report, that includes the State Senate District 23, where Keith Grover is nominated in that race. That does not include the state board of education, because that's a multi-county race. But that does include the commission seats, seat A, Amelia Powers Gardner being nominated, seat B, Brandon Gordon being nominated, the county attorney's race, Jeff Gray being nominated, the county auditor's race, Rod Mann being nominated, the Alpine School Board District 2, Wendy Renscher and Joylyn Lincoln being nominated. The School Board Alpine District 4, Sarah Beeson and Amber Bonner being nominated. School Board Alpine District 7, Ada Wilson, Cole Kelly being nominated. Because in those races, it'll be a 2-candidate race in the general election. So where more than 2 candidates were running, this election is to narrow that field to just 2 candidates. In the Nebo School District, number 4, Rick Ainge and Benjamin Woodward being nominated. In School Board Provo, Jennifer Partridge and Angie Carter being nominated. I think it's helpful to maybe review a little bit of background on this discussion about the type of data and reports that are available. There's been some question about this, this idea of cast vote record or statement of votes cast. And I think it'd be helpful to just clear some of that up. So there's been discussion about this idea of a cast vote record or CVR. The way our system works, which is quite sophisticated, very different than when election code was first adopted in its current form in 1993. We have, obviously computer systems that will scan ballots and then tabulate those votes. And there's a lot of data then that can be available in that computer system. For example, you scan a ballot, well, the system, in the guts could tell you, well, I know which scanner scanned that ballot. I know what type of ballot that was, like which precinct it was from. I know the time and the date it was scanned. I know how the votes for that particular ballot were cast. And so all of that type of information, could be available in the guts of the system. One of the things that we do as an audit process is we look at, and the term cast vote record is a single record for a single ballot. So when we count one ballot, we will have the paper ballot, which we archive, we'll have a digital image of that ballot that was scanned, and then the system will generate what's called this cast vote record, which will tell you how the system counted that particular ballot. That's called a cast vote record. Now, could you export a data file that would be an accumulation of all of the data from each of those cast vote records? Well, that is possible for, some purpose maybe. It's not something that's been discussed or envisioned within the current version of state code. It's not something that is specifically highlighted as part of the canvassing materials. And the concern about that type of a data file is if we generate that file, which it's not our process to do so. There's nothing about the way we administer elections in Utah. There's nothing, no direction from the state elections office about generating this particular file. But if we were to generate this type of file with all of those types of data fields, the concern becomes that you would know when a particular precinct ballot was counted, which if it was at a polling location, let's say, when combined with information about which voters voted, the poll book, for example, that you're able to review as Board of Canvassers, you could figure out and ascertain how a particular voter voted. Probably not how every voter voted, but certainly there are voters in Utah County that you could ascertain specifically how they voted when you pair that information together. And so I think that helps illuminate why the concern over, kind of generating that export of cast vote records and sharing that more broadly, whether that's part of the canvassing process or even sharing that publicly. One of the things that we did do is we generate simply the ballot number and the type of precinct that ballot number came from so that we can send that to the Lieutenant Governor's office to randomly select a statistically significant sample of ballots for the purpose of the post-tabulation audit, which was discussed a little bit. So I wanted to share that because I know there was some discussion in the public about this idea. Now, what is typical in the canvassing process is to share the statement of votes cast, which is a precinct by precinct summary of the results, which is something that is discussed in the code as part of the canvassing process and something that we share publicly that, I've shared with each of you and that is now posted on our website. So I hope that clears up confusion about that particular item. I know there's been discussion about that. The reason that's important is because in the state of Utah, under the state constitution, voters are given this right of a secret ballot. And if you look at the constitutional history, it's actually quite fascinating because there was a time in this country when ballots were not secret. And at the time that Utah became a state, it was actually a little bit of a controversy around the country whether you would have secret ballots or not have secret ballots. And at the time, some states did and some states did not. Utah, in their constitution, chose to have secret ballots. Well, interestingly, the very year after Utah becomes a state, there was a Supreme Court case at the state Supreme Court on this very topic, Ritchie versus Richards. What happened was the state auditor sued the state Board of Canvassers over the fact that the state legislature had adopted a law that required that when voters came in to vote, the poll worker would actually write on the ballot a unique serial number of sorts and then write that same number in the poll book next to that voter's name. Now, the poll book portion was supposed to be sealed after the election, but the concern was that in the future, you could actually pair that up if you needed to for some sort of an audit, if there was a concern about fraud. And so this was actually spelled out in state legislation. And so this became the basis of a Supreme Court case in which the court ruled that that law was unconstitutional. And they gave some very strong language about the idea that the secrecy of the vote that was cast by the voter is impenetrable, and that this idea of numbering the ballots, therefore, was void per the Constitution. And so this is the reason that we're not in a habit or a process of generating this type of report or sharing that type of report, because again, paired with other data, it creates a problem for the secrecy of the voter's vote. So I hope that clears up some question about that. I don't know if there's any additional questions on that topic.
So a question for you, Paul. The cast vote record in state law, is that something that is enumerated or it is explained that the Board of Canvassers should have access to?
Well, as far as I know, state law does not really address or define a cast vote record. Is that what you're asking?
Because when you were reading me those sections the other day, when you're going down through the different forms, cast vote record seemed to be one of those.
No, there's a record of votes cast, but that is different than the cast vote record. And I was confused myself as to why this would be unconstitutional. But after looking at, I've never been a member of the Board of Canvassers before now. This is my first time as a member of the Board of Canvassers. And as a member of the Board of Canvassers, I went down and looked at the poll books yesterday, which in state law we are entitled to look at. Now, I myself happen to have a photographic memory. So I looked at that, and you guys made sure we had no writing utensils and we had no cameras. So I was not able to write this down. I wasn't able to look at it. But I do know that Senator Mike Lee voted at 3:08 p.m. at the Health and Justice Building, and his wife Sharon voted at 3:09 p.m., and both of them happened to be a member of Provo 310 precinct. If you showed me a cast vote record, I could look up the ballot that was scanned at 3:09 p.m. and 3:10 p.m. for Provo 310 precinct at the Health and Justice Building, and I would be able to tell you how Senator Lee and his wife Sharon voted. And as far as the Constitution goes, it doesn't say that you have a right to a secret ballot from the public. It says you have a right to a secret ballot, period, which means that the senator and his wife have a right to a secret ballot from me, a member of the Board of Canvassers.
Sure, and I'll address some of that later. But I was down there the other day too and looked at it, and I saw the cast vote record. So I saw that along with the images, and according to what I was reading through with Paul, all those records should be available or applicable to the Board of Canvassers. Well, I mean, Josh, I think you'd agree with that too.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we invited you in to do that inspection and to look at that data. The concern is that it's probably not the right thing for our office to generate the comprehensive data export of all the cast vote records. Because once you start to be able to see them in sequence and with all that detail, that's when that privacy concern starts to come in.
Right.
But I think certainly as part of the canvassing and pre-canvass inspection, so to speak, as it's called in the statute, it's appropriate for you to come in and inspect all the materials that we have that go into the counting and tabulation. And all of you did that and looked at various things, and I think that's really a good part of the process. And, if you've got other questions and comments or anything directed at me, great. I would just close my presentation by saying I'd like to acknowledge the effort of pretty much everybody in the community that is a part of this process, from the election team who works here at the county, all of the poll workers that work temporarily that come in, certainly from the political space, you have the political parties, because, this is a primary for the Republican Party. There's a lot of work that goes in there. All of the candidates who run and all of the various volunteers that are involved in those campaigns. I think it's a testament to the care and concern of our community and self-government that you have all these people whose effort is involved in deciding who our leaders will be at any given time. So, I heard some applause earlier. If there's any time to applause, now would be a great time to give a round of applause to all of those people. And our elections team is here. If they'd stand up in the back. Oh, they're shy. They don't want to stand up. But we have some rock stars that do some long days and long nights.
Yeah.
They were remarkable. They answered a lot of questions for me, so I appreciate that.
So a couple questions. You're finished with your presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Oh,
I was going to make a quick comment here, just to clarify, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Josh, but Josh mentioned that the Board of Canvassers does declare the countywide races as being nominated, but we're also declaring the vote tallies in the statewide races finalized from our county to pass on.
Correct.
Want to make sure that
Right.
that idea got across.
Yep, correct. Yep, that's a good clarification. I would agree. And all of those are in the summary report, which forms part of the report of the canvasser. So when you sign the cover letter, it explains that that you're certifying and making those declarations pursuant to that final summary report.
For this report.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, the
Or
official,
one like it,
the
yeah.
official results, exactly, which are also posted online and available to the public.
so Josh, a couple questions, and these are general questions. And they would be applicable at any time even in the past, these questions have been asked. And that is, did you see any evidence of ballot box stuffing?
No, we did not. We did not detect any evidence of ballot box stuffing. Our ballot drop boxes this year were actually under video surveillance throughout the election. We had some sort of temporary drop boxes or ballot boxes at polling locations or city offices that would have been supervised by staff either at the city or poll workers. And we actually had a hotline for tips if there was any questions or concerns about any kind of nefarious activity, and did not receive any reports. And so I can confidently say, no, we didn't see any evidence of that.
Did you see any evidence of fraud? I mean, usually during an election, sometimes there's odd things that happen, and usually in the past when we've done this, there's been a couple examples here and there of things that were maybe out of order that had to be scrutinized. Was there any of those?
Nope, there was no evidence or any reports brought to our office of any fraudulent activity. The only things that I don't think are intentional fraud that we catch are when the wrong person essentially signs the envelope to send back a ballot. There's a couple of cases that we're looking into that are likely members of the same household, maybe thinking that like a child that's away at college or something like, or a mission or something, maybe they signed on their behalf, which is not permitted. Those ballots can't get counted, don't get counted. And there's just a small couple of those that we investigate each cycle. But beyond that, no, we didn't see any evidence of fraud, didn't have any reports of fraudulent activity.
And then the last question, on a digital basis, I know that none of your machines are hooked up to the internet, and so. But did you see, or is there any potential for digital manipulation?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that we actually did new this year, and again, it's a thanks to our internal service provider here at the county, our IT department. During our pre-election preparation, IT did an inspection of our ballot center and our equipment to identify whether or not any of our tabulation equipment is connected to the county's network or the internet, has been, for example, issued an IP address on the county's network. And so we kind of did this pre-cybersecurity review and didn't find any problems or issues in that regard. Our tabulation equipment is not connected to the internet. And that includes the machines that scan the ballots and then deliver that data to a local computer where that tabulation software is run. That is a closed loop system that is not connected to the outside internet or the county's network for that matter. And in utilizing all of that equipment this election, there was no anomalous activity. There was nothing that we detected that was problematic or potentially fraudulent or anything related to any kind of unauthorized intrusion to the system.
And then I did get a call, and then this was later, but there was a machine that went down during the process, and there should be a process that's followed, if things happen like that, where all the processes when things happen that are unusual, which you never know when,
Right.
A bell's going to go off or
Right.
something's going to happen.
Yep.
Can you maybe explain what happened there? Because
Sure.
the individual who called me was quite animated about it. When
Yeah.
actually, when I listened to the whole story, I was sitting there thinking, well, okay, where does it go? But
Right.
still, if you could just kind of
Yeah.
illuminate on
Yeah,
that.
great question. So yeah, every election is very much a big logistical activity, right? Lots of moving parts. You have poll workers who often come to a kind of a one-day training, and then this is the one day they're working. You're deploying equipment out. You just have a lot of moving parts, right? So occasionally there will be an operational or logistical hiccup of sorts. So on election day, we didn't experience any that were out of the ordinary. I'll explain the few that we did have. So a couple of our polling locations reported that they had an issue where the check-in pad for voters wasn't connecting to the printer where the ballot would be printed, and that caused a few minute delay at a few locations. So for example, you might have a couple voters in line and they had to wait 5 or 10 minutes until the printer would connect so that when they checked in, we could then print their ballot for their particular precinct. We got those up and running. We didn't get any reports of long lines or people being turned away. Those were like maybe 5 or 10, 15-minute delays at the most, and we had a couple of those. And then during our internal processing here at the county, as we're receiving ballots that we've picked up from our drop boxes or gotten in the mail, the first step of the process is to scan the envelope so that we can capture the signature and essentially check that voter off the list as having returned their ballot. So we use a mail sorting machine, which runs through thousands of ballots a year. And periodically, you have to change the belt on that machine for it to function properly. So about midway through election day, we had to change the belt on that machine. And then once you've changed the belt, you have to readjust the tensions, sensor on it. And so that took a couple of hours for us to change the belt and get the machine back up and running. And we did and continued the process. And by the end of the election night, when we issued our final report, it constituted about 75% of all the ballots that would eventually be counted, which I think is pretty good to have, the end of the election night and about 75% complete. So while we did have those minor hiccups, I would say they're not significant, they're not unanticipated, they're not out of the ordinary, but they do happen from time to time. And I think that we followed our process well and were able to continue without any other interruptions.
So the question that he had on this too was the machine left in the system override all day?
Was the machine left in the system override? And
I don't know why the question's being asked. I'm just reiterating the question.
That's not terminology I'm familiar with. It certainly wouldn't have been in an abnormal status for any long duration.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner, do you have any questions you want to ask?
No, I spent about 2 hours in the ballot center yesterday and asked all my questions.
And I had actually a great visit with the elections team separate from the clerk auditor, and the senior policy advisor and I spent a lot of time going over it. So the questions that Commissioner Lee asked is kind of just reinforced some of the thoughts I've had, so I don't have any additional questions. I think what I'll do, if there's no additional questions, maybe I'll just do a wrap-up summary from me, and maybe Commissioner Gardner, you might have something after that, and maybe Commissioner Lee after Commissioner Gardner. I jotted some notes because I don't want to forget, because this is an important occasion as it is for Commissioner Gardner. This is my first, and so I did some digging through the state code and see what guides the Board of Canvassers. But the thing that growing up in Maryland, it was I got enamored. I fell in love with the nation's history, with all of its pucks and all of its strengths, and I just have never tired of it. But what drove me to serve the Marine Corps was to try to ensure that all Americans enjoy like privileges, and to learn to take responsibility for their own lives and to be able to express them without fear of retribution, have the freedom to come and go. And 30 years of U.S. Marine Corps service to the United States also ingrained in me the need to establish and follow facts. As a member of the Utah County Board of Commissioners, those same drives compel me to act in the interest of the people within Utah County and for the integrity of our county government. And it's interesting to note that one of the definitions to canvass, besides what you normally think of, is to conduct a detailed examination. And I think in our various turns separately, we did that. We didn't go together, we acted independent of each other. And to that end, I and my senior policy advisor, Lisa Shepard, we received a copy of the Utah State Auditor's summary report of the 898 Utah County ballots that they reviewed on July 6th of this year. And they felt that it was complete and thorough. I further reviewed, as did my senior policy advisor, the duties of the Board of Canvassers in state statute and conferred with the Utah County Clerk Auditor quite a bit, actually, separately and together. We observed the balloting processes that the Clerk Auditor just described and observed the automated initial reading, sorting of ballots into whole and rejected or spoiled ballots, and sorting separately for sending back to voters, in some cases, a letter saying this needs to be repaired, fixed, the signature is wrong, or the ballot was incorrectly done. I personally randomly selected stored ballots into a locked area. And I had 4 pairs of eyes watching what my hand was going to do with that box as I brought it down. We broke the seal on that, and then randomly we picked up the stack of ballots that are in there. I'm guessing roughly 500, 400, 500, somewhere like that. And I found it to be a mix of mailed as well as walked-in ballots. We then took those ballots to a computer and compared at random. I would pick a sheet of paper, and then the clerk auditor went to that particular identifying number and found that the ballots on the computer was fully represented on the paper ballot. And so they agreed. We went then and randomly selected the empty envelopes and checked, randomly picked out signatures and compared that to the computer, which was accept and which was not. And we saw that they also matched. And in every case, the paper ballot completely matched the electronic record. And today, the Clerk Auditor's public reviewed the summary reports prepared by the election team or officer, and the Board of Canvassers has separately and randomly reviewed and confirmed the accuracy of votes counted and recorded. Serving 30 years in the Marine Corps, I don't forget a whole lot about what it costs to maintain rights. It's easy to talk about it and see it on various ads, but freedom is costly, extremely costly. And when we try to defend other people, other nations who can't defend themselves, trying to to accept the same thing that we take for granted, it's a hard thing to see, but it's also exhilarating to watch them wake up to the realities of what freedom actually means. And so that was the focus and the mindset I had when I wanted to have a review and in my text with you separately. Based on what I have looked at from my own random sampling and that of my senior policy advisor that we did separately and together, I have full confidence in the election process and recordings, and I'm able to vote for its validation today. Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, one of the things that impresses me about our election staff is how willing they are to continually improve every process. And knowing what the process was like when I came in as the clerk auditor in 2019 and seeing 2.5 years of updates, and then even coming back as a member of the Board of Canvassers a year later and seeing even more, that's very encouraging to me. I don't think that any process is perfect. I don't think our processes are perfect, and I love that the staff continually embraces continual improvement. Just going from 10% of ballots returned to to less than 3% of ballots returned to less than 1% of ballots returned is just one example of that. But I love the continual improvement. I think that there's always room for improvement. I know that our team here in Utah County has been integral in working with the state legislature to continue updating laws. And I would just encourage us to continue to do that. We are bound by the law. We are bound by the laws that the legislature makes. They subscribe pretty much every step of this process. And if we can continue to make things better, do that as an example to the state, and then work with the legislature to adopt those changes, I encourage that. So it was great seeing even the continual improvements in the last year. And, like adding cameras to all of the drop boxes, things like that were very encouraging. And I would just encourage us to continue to do that and adopt policies and procedures that always continually improve.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. First off, to the staff who worked on this election and to Josh Daniels and his staff, thank you for the work that you do. It's amazing to think of in such a short period of time the amount of data, concerns, problems, logistics that happen. It's overwhelming, and in some cases very daunting. And so I thank you for the work that you have done, and Josh, thank you for yesterday's opportunity to go down there and we had some pretty frank conversations, which was fun to have back and forth on certain topics and issues, and then look at some of the records, and I'll say some of the records because that's all it was just a handful, maybe a precinct here and there, which I'd like to get to, but as candidate Bill Lee, the election results were disappointing. And that's just obvious, right? It was disappointing to see how that went. And who knows? I've been studying elections my entire life and being a part of them. And seeing what happened is still a mystery. And it probably would be one that I never figure out. But you know what? Life goes on, and I understand that. And after we get done with this this canvassing process, I made the mention to some of the media outlets. I said, well, I'm gonna wait until every vote is counted, and that's today. Every vote is counted, and then I plan on, and I hope Brian Chapman will help me, but I plan on calling Brandon Gordon and having a conversation with him and wishing the best for the future. Now, as Commissioner Bill Lee, there's two different roles. As candidate Bill Lee, that election's over with. It's gone. It's done, right? That the people have spoken. We as a people and myself, I highly favor this process. I think it's one of the best in the world. I will stand by it and I'll fight for it, and I always will, no matter what the outcomes is. I mean, my wife, she was a little bit distraught about it and everything, and I said, honey, the reason why I'll win is because I'm not afraid to lose. Losing is not the end, and that's all right. We can move forward. But as Commissioner Bill Lee, I had to put a different hat on, and as that hat went on, I started thinking about this process because as your representative, I'm supposed to be, and not just yours, but everyone in the county from different thoughts and thought processes, I'm supposed to be a reflection of you, and I reflect your feelings, your thoughts. I don't always agree. You don't always agree with me, but nevertheless, I'm a reflection of you. I've heard, and I had lots of people call me up. They were concerned. They were downtrodden too with the election results, not just on mine, but on others that were going on too. And so, and there's concern. We have a lawsuit that's going on right now, in which they're talking about, how do I get these CVRs? But I'd never seen a CVR. I didn't, it's like, what is a CVR? I didn't know exactly what that was. I talked with our legal staff and we go back and forth, but I'd never seen one myself. And here we have a lawsuit and everything. And so I decided on my own, some people think that there's some sort of conspiracy or something going on, which is just not true. On my own, I said, you know what? I'm going to ask for the CVRs as a member of the Board of Canvassers. Why not look at that record, this secret record that everyone's holding? And so that's the reason why I sent that email. And I sent that email off to Josh Daniels and Roseanne, and also to the commissioners or senior policy advisors. I wanted them to know that I'm not doing this any backdoor way. I want them to know that I'm asking for the CVRs. This report or this document that no one seems to be able to get their hands on, except for those that are in the election office. And so I did. I sent that out, asking for it, and it went days and days with no response. The only add to that chain at the very beginning was Commissioner Sakovich said, I'd like to see those too, which I think rightfully so as a canvasser. We should be able to look at that information. And so I saw that, and then it was later in the week. And remember, we have between the 7th day after to the 14th day. We can't certify anything before the 7th or after the 14th. That's the window. I sent that on that Tuesday, the 7th day after the election. And so I was looking for those, was waiting for a reply back, did not see one for a number of days, which was concerning to me on it. And then I got a media request, which kind of blew my mind. Because one, I'm asking for something that I have the full right to look at. And somebody not necessarily in that email chain, because I know there was a conversation with the Lieutenant Governor's office as well, so I don't know where it went from there. But somebody in that process, and shame on them for trying to blow this out and make some sort of spectacle with it. Because I'm asking for something that's duly owed to me as a county commissioner, to any one of the county commissioners, and they know who they are, and they did this for political reasons to just blacken a name and cause chaos. That's what's wrong with the political system. We tend to talk to each other through the media, and not all media is bad. I mean, I really enjoy Kelsey. I'll just have to say that while you're sitting right there. I've enjoyed the interactions with her from the Daily Herald, but nevertheless, the wrong is that we communicate to each other through media and through blasting and trying to have people write hit pieces. It's just appalling. So anyway, that happened. I've still never received the CVRs. I mean, I have seen them, a couple of them here and there, and I find it in looking at the CVRs, I understand. And this is probably where it gets a little bit confusing for me. As I ask the questions, more questions start to come up, and then you can kind of work down through it, and I also start seeing more problems. And one of them that surfaced that was very concerning to me, and it is still very concerning to me, is this constitutionality issue. I know I talked with Josh. I know he has some concerns with it too. The constitutionality that you can triangulate, not my words, but you can triangulate and find out who voted as Commissioner Gardner, mentioned that's a possibility, and it does have us in the Constitution where it does not say that should not happen. That should never happen. That's a problem. That's a serious problem that I think the state legislature in this needs to fix. There's got to be some sort of solution to this so that we don't even have anybody in the county have that opportunity, be it in the clerk auditor's office or not, to be able to triangulate and get back down and look at somebody's vote and say, hey, now I know how they voted. That needs to be fixed, and I would hope that through this process of asking questions, and I committed to all of the people in Utah County that I would ask questions, and I'd ask hard questions, because I think by asking questions, we start to filter down through it, and it's painful, but it's a filtering process in which we get to a resolution, or we get to an area in which we have better understanding. And as we understand, just like laws change over time, to give us better clarification, you couldn't jaywalk across the street, or you couldn't, there's lots of little silly laws that are out there. Maybe we need to look at this process and do a little bit of revamping with it so that we get to a proper place. Second, another one. When it comes to trust, we hear this all the time, trust but verify. I've heard that I don't know how many times now over the last week or so. This one concerns me on a level as a member of the Board of Canvassers, because we are we are asked in some regards to trust and verify a little bit. But not, what does that mean to verify? What does it mean to fully verify? And this is a question that I had with Josh yesterday. What's the role of the Board of Canvassers? Because if the role of the Board of Canvassers is just to rubber stamp and to get a summary, then is that really what we're looking for? I think that's problematic in and of itself. And if there's no need for a Board of Canvassers, then why are we here? Because if we don't, I asked Paul, our attorney here, I asked him, he usually gives us a what, kind of a what if stuff. What's our options? You can vote yes, you can vote no, you can vote to abstain, you can vote to do this, you can do, that's what he always gives us, options on grandma request stuff. He gives us all the options on that. And in this issue and at this time, there is only one vote that we can cast, and it's yes. That's it. There's no other options, because if we vote no, they certified another route anyway. So that concerns me, because why are we doing this? Why are we going through it? We want our elected officials to be a part of a check and a balance, and we kind of look at that, the board of as canvassers as part of that check and balance. But is it really functioning as a check and balance if that's the vote that we get? Is that we get a vote yes, and that's it.
Commissioner Lee, I was going to add to that.
Well,
I was just going to add to it. Okay.
Yeah, let me finish. There's
You made a great point.
because I'm trying to go through my train of thought.
Oh yeah, no problem. Not a problem. I was going to add to it, but
Yeah.
I can do it at the end.
Yeah, and so for me, it's in Russia, an individual named Potemkin, he made it famous. In what he would do, he would take and he'd set up these shell fake cities, and then they'd drive people through it and say, "Look how wonderful everything is." And I certainly do not want this board of canvassers to be Potemkin, in that it's just a shell. It has no ability to go back and verify, or to verify deeply, or to ask questions, all the way through. We have limited time. I mean, do you know how much, I don't know how many times, information's down there, but if we've got over 90,000 ballots down there, and we've got CVRs attached to them, and you probably double, triple, quadruple the number of information that's down there in that vote center. There's a lot of information down there. And we got an hour or two, to look at some of this stuff on a superficial level. I know that Lieutenant Governor's office with the 1% comes through and takes a peek at it and says, here's the information on a summary basis that you sent to us. I'm going to pick this one, and this one. You go back and give me a spot check with it. I personally think that's inadequate. I think that that's really superficial. And I think it doesn't give us, it doesn't give us the level of scrutiny that an election needs to have, because this is the bedrock of our republic, our constitutional republic, and without having the scrutiny at the levels that we need, and I only attest them to the levels in which I see in the county government. When we do financials, we hire an outside auditor that comes in and goes through it, and they don't just say, well, just pull me a couple here and pull me a couple there. They get in and they deep dive in. And if they find something, they go a little bit further, and that's kind of how they do the auditing process. And so if we were to rank our processes of financial audits, of HR policies, if there's somebody has a claim or something like that, we hire out, we get experts to come in. If we have issues on a legal basis that we can't handle with we got floors and floors of lawyers, we got a floor above us with lawyers and floor over there with lawyers. We got a lawyer sitting right here. There's lawyers everywhere, but yet we often hire out for specialty purposes. And I think rightfully so. We hire it out because we need to know and we want to feel comfortable, especially when we have to make a vote, and especially when we're talking about money. But I'm concerned that when we're talking about votes, that we don't give the same comfort level, and especially when it comes down to the individual or to the people that are sitting out there wondering what's going on. And, did my vote really cast? I mean, I can look it up and say, yeah, it was counted. Great. I heard one person say, and it's a change, And I'm not saying the changes are bad, but I remember when I used to go and cast in person, before I actually hit the submit, it'd give me a field of all of my individuals I was casting for, and then I'd hit submit and it'd go through. It gave me a certain level of comfort because I knew that was in line with what I actually did, what I was casting. And so for me, the power of the Board of Canvassers, I think, is weakened. It acts a little bit like a rubber stamp instead of an actual a group of verifications, and so I have concerns about them. Again, as candidate Bill Lee, and I know that people tried to attest this, that it's just being a poor sport. That's nonsense. They're trying to read into it, and they're trying to tie. Like I mentioned to you, I never talked with anybody specifically about. No one asked me specifically and said, "Hey, I want you to do this." Never happened. It was me asking as a member of the Board of Canvassers. Now, I have talked with other people after. I have talked with other people about what can be done and what are some of the things that we should do as we try to make this process purer as we go forward and more accountable. And I have some thoughts on that, but I'll come back to that after Commissioner Gardner.
Well, I was going to, make a comment. One of the things that was a little bit difficult for me as a member of the Board of Canvassers was the fact that I was a candidate. And as a candidate, I didn't want to walk through the ballot center and be looking over people's shoulders all the time. Right? And so I only entered the ballot center once during the active election, and that was with several members of the staff, and that was to take a tour just like they gave to the public. I took a tour with them through the public, but other than that, I didn't walk in that center once because I was a candidate. And so I think it is interesting, and I wouldn't be opposed to saying, if you are a candidate on the ballot, that you recuse yourself as a member of the Board of Canvassers and pass that on to the next person. I do think it quite odd that the majority, 2/3 of this Board of Canvassers were also candidates on the ballot. Yeah. Right? But that's prescribed in state law. Just like you're saying, that's prescribed in state law. I could definitely see a change there. I would not be offended at all if state law said that because I was a candidate on this ballot that I recused. In fact, we've got, one of the alternates for the Board of Canvassers is here, and I would be more than willing to recuse myself now and have him certify it rather than me, because that does put us as a candidate and a member of the Board of Canvassers in a very awkward situation. But once again, that is prescribed in state law.
Right.
So that's another area for improvement.
Yeah. And so I know I laid out a lot of concerns that I have and have had, for some time in looking at them and not being able to, I think, fully have all the information that I needed and to be able to sift down through whatever that process was, going back to the trust but verify. As a commissioner, I deal with a lot of sensitive information and confidential information all the time. I'm constantly dealing with confidential information, but it appears like that in this case, confidential information is not something that can be shared or should be shared, with a member of the Board of Canvassers, which I think is very disheartening because, again, I am not an expert when it comes to elections. And for the most part, I need to be able to read down through things and ask individuals and have a process that I go through to get there. And yet the vote today has to be a yes vote. It's a forced yes vote just because of the way that we have to do this by today. And so it moves forward, even though I just want you to know that I'm not comfortable with the process. The outcome, so be it. But there's things in here that make me really nervous, and so I laid out a lot of things that I'm concerned about, that I'm nervous about, that I hope that in the future, with a new legislature or others, they will look at and try to modify. The biggest one that came out from asking this question was that constitutionality issue. That one really bugs me. I think that should somehow be taken care of. I do know with the CVR though, in looking at that information and some of that information on how you can triangulate it. There are ways, just like we do with grandma or others, and that is that we redact information. We take things off. We can easily take off a precinct. We can easily take off, whatever you want to, whatever that's on there that can be used, and information can be given, to us. Maybe a certain amount or individuals, for verification purposes, because if those are gone, then you can't go through that process. So we do that all the time with government records. It's not unusual to do that. And so I have a proposal because I'm putting out a lot of concerns, and the last thing is that I would like to see if we can build and bridge a gap, because I don't want our constitutional republic to be in this kind of disarray and to have this thought process continue to the point to where it starts to really destroy. I think that's the fear. And I'm fearful of that as I look across the country and what's going on. We have got to be able to find some common ground, or some ways that we take and we look at each other in such a way that we're trying to find commonality and information that gives us some sort of security. We can't always have that, but I get that we should try. We should strive for it. So here's my motion, if I can make a motion. My motion is that we sign the June 28th, 2022 election certification report. And along with that motion, that we take the next week until the Wednesday, not tomorrow, but the following week, and we allow for a professional statistician to look at the redacted, or go down to the ballot center and get the information to do the statistical analysis that was explained to us. Not with any triangulation information, but just with information, and come back to us on Wednesday with that information and show us the graph and the charts that she has found and seen. My hope in that is that it gets to the point where we look at it, because as Josh mentioned, he said he saw no fraud, he saw no misunderstanding or construing of any information with it. And so my hope is that it comes back and it shows everything within those bars, or if there's not, there can be probably logical explanations for it. And we as Utah County can start to get past some of this. That's my hope. And so that's my motion, Mr. Chair.
It sounds like it's two motions, actually, so
No, it's one motion.
because we're confined to accept the declare elected or nominated those persons who had the highest number of votes and sought election or nomination to an office completely within the board's jurisdiction. So we're kind of confined as to what we're doing today.
I don't see any reason why we can't add that on there as part of the motion.
Of course, we do want to be mindful of our notice requirements under the Open and Public Meetings Act. And, the board's main obligation here is to make sure that you don't take any action that the public is not made aware of beforehand. That's the gold standard for agendas and for making motions.
Yeah, unfortunately, that we're confined to do one thing only today, and that is just certify the gross total numbers of those who had those who had sought for election.
All right. And that's fair enough. If we want to go down that route, maybe I will just ask then to modify that motion. Well, before I do that, I'll just ask the question then, is there any concern about the second part? It's not a motion. We're not going to vote on it. But I just want to know if there's any concern about going through a process to help heal this divide that we have in the county.
I would say as long as we have approval from legal that any information given is within the bounds of what we're legally allowed to give, I think it's a great idea.
Okay?
So, you know, I would, like I said, with the caveat that I would want clearance from legal to ensure that it's within the bounds of what's legally available, but within those parameters.
It's not
and those
giving
guardrails.
information. It's not giving the information.
Right.
It's sitting down there with somebody who says, you know, we're going to pick the points out.
Yeah.
Like I said, as long as it gets legal clearance, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll continue this discussion, but I see no handicap to do that because as we've mentioned, it's always, the American ideal is something always in progress. We've never arrived and never will arrive at the American ideal. So this is part of that ideal. And so I would welcome additional insights, yes.
Okay.
So yes.
Well, with that, I'll modify my motion then. My motion, maybe before I start the motion, it's under a little bit of force, and I'll keep saying that over and over. There's only one vote that I get to put on this thing. But the motion is to sign the June 28th, 2022 elections certified report.
And I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. And we've come to the end of this session. We've had public comments earlier deliberately because we want to hear what your thoughts were to help shape what our discussion would entail. So that, I believe, is it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We were adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for coming, Utah County. And anyone else that might be here outside Utah County.
Goodbye.